प्रपन्नपारिजाताय तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः. Om. Dear friends, in the last episode we just completed the 5th adhyaya, which was called Karma Sannyasa Yoga, and we saw at the end of that chapter Krishna introduced 3 shlokas, and those 3 shlokas talked about what is called dhyanam or atma sanyama, restraint of self. So he told certain things like chakshushchaiva antare bhruvoho, how you have to close your eyes and then you have to look at say the middle of the brows, and then how you have to make this prana apana samau krutva, equate this prana and apana, and then yatendriya mano buddhihi. He used all those things as a sort of introduction, as a sort of linking up with the next chapter, which is called Dhyana Yoga. So this particular chapter, it is a slightly bigger chapter than the earlier one. That is, 5th chapter had only 29 shlokas. So this chapter is having about 47 verses. So this is a slightly bigger one. So here the title also, in different editions, of course you may see different names. Say one edition calls it a Dhyana Yoga. Dhyana means we all know some idea of dhyana, we all have some idea of dhyana. Dhyana means meditation. Then some other texts call it Abhyasa Yoga. Abhyasa means practice. Unless you practice something, you will not become an expert in anything. So Abhyasa, here also this meditation has to be practiced. Meditation and also this control of this sense organs, etc., it has to be practiced. So it is referring to the practice of different types, not only meditation, different types of practices. Then it is also called Atma Sanyama Yoga. Atma means self, Sanyama means controlling. So the path of self-control. Dhyana Yoga means the path of meditation. Then the other one, Abhyasa Yoga, is the path of practice, and Atma Sanyama Yoga means the path of self-control. So this is what it means. So we may have a doubt. In fact, in the last episode itself, I was raising the doubt. That is not Karma Yoga enough? Because Karma Yoga was also told, is it not enough? And again Sannyasa was also told, is it not enough? So the Krishna says, no, it is not enough, because it is like a first class. Then again you have come to the second class. Then again you have to graduate to the third class or third standard, let us say. So why? Because Karma Yoga, we know that we had an elaborate discussion on what Karma Yoga is, and we have seen that Karma Yoga is something where you do not desire the fruit of that karma, and then you are absolutely totally neutral to the result of it. So which means that it has given you some little bit of chitta shuddhi with say in that specific aspect called karma. But then there are other things. Means your mind gets tempted, your mind is not yet under control. When you look at a thing, your mind longs for it. Then if you don't get it, your mind hates it. Raga, dvesha, all these things, your mind gets agitated when you don't get a thing. So all these things, the love for say various things, all these things are very much there. So Karma Yoga may give some chitta shuddhi with particular reference to the fruit of a karma, but then it doesn't give you chitta shuddhi completely. It doesn't give freedom from various dualities, etc. So that is still there. Then Sannyasa Yoga. Sannyasa Yoga, we have seen that what is called the preparatory level sannyasa. Preparatory level sannyasa, okay, I am a seeker, for example. So in all good faith, I go to an ashram and then I take up sannyasa. And in some traditions, they also do this mundanam. So in fact, there is an Upanishad called Mundakopanishad. Mundakopanishad means, say mundanam is what? Mundanam is shaving off the head, total tonsuring. When you go to Tirupati and then tonsure it, it is called mundanam. And that mundanam, why do they do that? So that you have no sense of that pride in your handsomeness. That is, when you have nice hair and then nice hairstyle, etc., you look at yourself, and then every time I spend say a few minutes or maybe some more time to dress my hair, etc. But then when you are totally taking off the hair, it shows that you are, at least in front of God, you are showing your humility, and you are coming out of your sense of say that pride in your handsomeness, etc., etc. So that is a sort of surrender, a little bit. It signifies rather a little bit of surrender. So, that is mundanam. A sannyasi, of course, he does it all through his life. So, which means he has to continuously remind himself that he belongs to a special order. He is not supposed to have say temptations. He should at least control those temptations. By merely shaving off one's head, temptations will not go. We have a good poem in Telugu. For example, what is it? Talalu bodinanta talapulu bodune Vishwadabhirama Vinuravema we say. That is, by merely tonsuring your head, you have not cleaned your all the bad thoughts. The bad thoughts may still be there. A person may still have a roving eye, as we call it, a roving eye. When you look at a woman, you keep looking at her. So, that is called a roving eye. So, a person may still have all that. So, that is, it may still be there in Sannyasa Yoga, it may still be there in Karma Yoga. So, all these things are there. So, what is the remedy? After all, great people like Vishwamitra, etc., Vishwamitra, Parashara, etc., they also actually they were tempted in the same way. Vishwamitra, Parashara, for example, there is a beautiful say Subhashita by Bhartruhari. Vishwamitra, Parashara, Prabhutayo, Vatambu Parnashanaha, he says. So, I will not say the entire sloka, I will tell the meaning. That is, people like Vishwamitra, and we have seen Parashara, sage Parashara is the father of sage Vyasa. So, Parashara was once going on a ferry. He was crossing the river Ganges, and the ferry woman, the mother, that lady called Satyavati, she was so beautiful that this man, he fell for her, and then they had a baby. That baby grew up as sage Vyasa. So, Parashara, he fell in love with a fisherwoman, and similarly Vishwamitra, who was sitting for tapas, he fell in love with, he was distracted, or rather he was say enticed by a celestial dancer called Menaka. So, we have seen all these things. So, even such great people, they were enticed by the looks of a woman. So, that is what that particular shloka by Bhartruhari says. So, like that, this Atma Sanyama is what gives that particular restraint, that particular control on the mind and the sense organs. Shama and Dama. Dama is forcibly restraining the external sense organs, and Shama is educating the mind. Shama is educating the mind and then controlling the mind. So, when Dama is there, the mind may still be mischievous. The mind may still be mischievous. The mind may still be doing several things, but then outwardly I am behaving like a gentleman. Outwardly I am controlling myself. I am not looking at girls, etc. But inwardly, my mind may be wandering on those things. So, when I control my mind also, it is called Shama. When I educate my mind, it is called Shama. So, this particular chapter talks about these things called controlling the mind. And how is this mind controlled? So, this is done by a conscious practice. So, here the problem and the question of why to control the mind, we have answered sufficiently. Why to control the mind means, unless you have a control of mind, you will not be able to do Atma Vichara. The basic problem here is, if you want to read physics or chemistry or mathematics or some such subject, you need not have any self control. You need not have control of mind. You may still look at say women, you may still do various things, you may still do all things in life, but then you may still be a good mathematician, a good philosopher. For example, Stephen Hawking, one of the greatest scientists, or probably the greatest scientist now living. So, he has a fondness for visiting some cabarets, it seems. He himself has say mentioned it. So, like that, a person may have some fondness for something. So, to that extent he has that fascination. So, anyway, so Atma Vichara is something which is not possible unless a mind is totally rid of these things. So, that is the problem here. We are now talking about a seeker. In fact, I have told repeatedly that we are not talking about an ordinary man here, we are talking about a seeker. An ordinary man definitely has to learn a lesson. An ordinary man definitely learns something from this. But then this is a prescription for the seeker, because a seeker is somebody who has to get rid of all these things if he has to do some Atma Vichara. Otherwise, when the scripture says Tattvamasi, etc., that you are, how is he able to relate to himself? Aham Brahmasmi, how is he going to relate to himself that I am at that level, when I am having some when I am limiting myself to this body-mind complex, and when I am trying to have say sense gratification for this limited body-mind complex, how am I equating myself with that Brahman? It is impossible. So, a person, if he wants to have this self-realization, he has to necessarily have this sort of control. So, this is why this Atma Vichara, it is said that Atma Vichara is simply not possible. Another example given in Vedanta is, this example also in fact I had told once or twice, it is the example of a lake. You see water, for example, sun or moon gets reflected in a lake only when the water is clear and only when the water is not shaking. So, the two requirements are, water should be, it should be very, very clear, it should not be turbid, and it should not be turbulent also. The water should not be turbid, not turbulent also. It should be calm and it should be say it should be clear, calm and clear. So, that is what is needed. The mind also should be like that. So, that is what is the picture here. So, this particular adhyaya, which is talking about this yoga, as we call it, dhyana yoga, this dhyana or meditation or say what we call it Patanjali yoga, etc. This is something which is accepted in almost all branches of Indian philosophy. If we see our various branches of Indian philosophy, both Astika Darshanas and also Nastika Darshanas. Astika Darshanas are those which accept the authority of the Veda. Nastika Darshanas are those which do not accept the authority of the Veda. We know that there is Buddhism and Jainism which do not accept the authority of the Veda, but still they also accept this particular yoga systems. In fact, Buddhist monks, they have achieved very great say feats, physical feats in fact, by practicing, particularly these Tibetan monks. We come across these Tibetan monks who have done fantastic say things by fantastic levels of physical say abilities by practicing this yoga. So, like this Buddhists and Jains, though they do not accept the authority of the Veda, they are great exponents in this say system of yoga. So, this yoga is something which is accepted by all systems in India, and less emphasis, of course, we see that in Mimamsa and Tarka, these two philosophies, they do not emphasize it much, but they have not rejected also. So, but anyway, one person who has say done a very, very systematic work in this, and a person who has written a sort of treatise is, we know, Patanjali Yoga Shastra. Patanjali, he has written a Yoga Shastra. Patanjali, probably we do not exactly know the time, maybe he is from the 2nd century or 3rd century AD. So, he has written that Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, which is a very, very wonderful text which all of us have to read. In fact, it is available in English, and lot many English scholars, Western scholars have very, very authoritatively commented on that. In fact, some of them have read all the Sanskrit commentaries very in great depth, and then they have written very beautiful English commentaries, because yoga is something which is a sort of multi-billion-dollar industry in the West. Particularly in America, it is a multi-billion-dollar industry, same in various other Western countries. So, this is what is this yoga about. So, now we will see the say 6th adhyaya. In the 6th adhyaya, Krishna, of course, in the very beginning, he is praising Arjuna for what about the karma yoga. Anashrita karma phalam karyam karma karoti yaha sasanyasisha yogisha na niragnir nachakriyaha. I will not explain in great detail these shlokas, because it will take an enormous amount of time. So, I will briefly say that basically what he is saying is, in order to graduate to the next level called dhyana yoga, it is necessary to do karma yoga. So, that is the crux of it. It is necessary to do karma yoga, to practice karma yoga, so that you have some amount of clarity of mind and purity of mind, and then you can rise to the next level called dhyana yoga. Then the person who is in this karma yoga, he can be rightly called a sannyasi. So, he is giving a pat on the back of a karma yogi. Yam sannyasam iti prahuhu yogam tam vidhi pandava na hyasanyasta sankalpaha yogi bhavati kaschana. Asanyasta sankalpaha. In Sanskrit, in Vedanta, this sankalpa again is a beautiful word. Sankalpa means what? Kalpanam. Kalpana, you know what is kalpanam? Visualizing something. Sankalpa, you visualizing something great about it, something fantastic about it, and you develop love for it. So that is what is sankalpa. So you develop a fancy for it. Nowadays you use another word called crush. You have a so and so is having a crush on him or her, we say. So it is something like that. That is developing a sort of crush is called sankalpa. Here he says asanyasta sankalpaha na yogi bhavati. So somebody who has not discarded this sankalpa, you accept it without sankalpa. You accept something with if it is there, your duty, if it is so, you may have it. It is not as though you have to give up your wife and you have to give up your kids. You accept all of them. But this sort of excessive attachment or fondness or such a thing should not be there. So that is what he says. Then from third shloka, he comes to the topic of yoga. He says, Arurukshor muner yogam karma sadhana karanamuchyate. That is, karma is a sort of preparatory step for dhyana. He says, yogam aruruksho, for the one who wants to climb to the level of yoga. For the person, for the seeker who wants to get on to the level of yoga, karma is a sort of sadhanam. Karma is the means. And for somebody who has come to that level, of dhyana, then he should further cultivate what is called shama. Yogarudhasya tasyaiva shamah karanamuchyate, he says. Shama means that withdrawal from various sense objects, etc. That is what is called shama. So shama and dhamma, these words I explained. So here what the Vedantins say is, for a jnani, karma is only there in the initial stages. When a person becomes a realized person, that karma or action, it drops away. It is not relevant for him. Then but dhyana, it continues to remain. Dhyana or what is called meditation, it is something, it continues to remain in him, because dhyana is something which is controlling his mind, which is focusing his mind on what he has learnt, whatever Vedanta text he has studied from the Gurus. He has to continuously retain it in the mind. If he doesn't retain it in the mind, his perspective may become disturbed. So that is the problem. So that is why this dhyana has to be there continuously with him. Then he says, again he uses the word sarva sankalpa sannyasi in the very next shloka. Yadahi nendriyartheshu na karmasvu anushajyate sarva sankalpa sannyasi yogarudhastadochyate. He says sarva sankalpa sannyasi. So this sankalpa, this high visualization, so value attachment, let us say value attachment, or having a sort of great fancy for a thing. So those things, it has to be given up, and only then a person is called a yoga rudha, that is one who has qualified to be in that level called yoga. Yoga arudha. Arudha means one who has climbed to that level called yoga. Then now he says the usefulness, how a person has to help himself. One has to help oneself. So that is what he says. This particular fifth shloka is a fairly well quoted shloka. Several times people quote on different occasions. For example, this is a generally say a motivational verse also. Usually management people also quote it quite often. Uddhared atmanatmanam atmanam avasadayet, etc. This is something which is quoted by even the management people. So this shloka reads like this: Uddhared atmana atmanam na atmanam avasadayet atmaiva hyatmano bandhuhu atmaiva ripuratmanah. So what he says here is, one has to raise one's own self by one's own self. What does it mean? So one's own self means the self is this body-mind complex. This body-mind complex which is dragging us in different directions. Unless we restraining it alone is like raising one's own self by one's own self. That is, self. The word self has two levels of meaning in Vedanta. One is self at an ordinary level is the body-mind complex. Self at a higher level is the self, that is who am I, that real notion of I, that is what is called the self. So that notion of the meaning, that is who am I, the answer is I am that, I am something which is not different from that supreme reality, that is the real self. That is, I who am not different from that supreme reality is that real self. So, that is one level of self, and an ordinary self is this BMI, that is body mind say intellect, or BMC as they call it, body mind complex. So, this body mind complex has to be properly regulated, has to be properly used in order to attain to the next level of self. So, that is what is the meaning of Uddhared Atmana Atmanam Na Atmanam Avasadayet. We are not supposed to allow that Atma to fall. We are not supposed to allow that self to fall. That is, our ultimate objective is to realize the self, realize what I am. So, that is the point here. Na Atmanam Avasadayet. We should not allow it to fall down or drag down. Then Atmaiva Hyatmano Bandhuhu. The body mind complex itself is the Bandhu. It is a friend. It is a friend. When it is properly controlled, it is a friend. If it is not properly controlled, it is an enemy. Atmaiva Ripuratmanaha. When it is properly controlled, it is a Bandhu. When it is not properly controlled, it is a Ripu. Ripu means an enemy. Then he says the same thing, he repeats, Bandhur Atma Atmanastasya Gyana Atmaiva Atmana Jitaha. That is, by one who has controlled his body mind complex, his body mind complex becomes a friend to his higher self. So, let us call it the lower self and the higher self. The lower self is the body mind complex. So, if you control the lower self, then that is a friendly thing to realize the higher self. So, let us say like that. Then the next, what is the usefulness of this particular yoga? What is the use? So, that is they told from the shlokas number 7 to 9, he is telling about what is the usefulness of this yoga. And after this thing, after telling about the usefulness, then he says, then he starts talking about how to go about this, what exactly is this yoga and how to go about, he says. So, about this usefulness or the achievement from this yoga, he says, Jitatmanaha prashantasya paramatma samahitaha shitoshna sukha dukkheshu tatha manapamanayoho Gyana Vijnana Truptatma Kutastho Vijitendriyaha Yukta Ityuchate Yogi Samalosthashma Kanchanaha. He says, so for somebody who has attained that self-control, and then who is a prashanta and who has attained that level of serenity, who has attained that level of equanimity, the supreme self, that is the object of his realization. And then he becomes above all, he overcomes, or rather he goes beyond all the dualities such as pleasure and pain, honor and dishonor, tatha mana apamana yoho. He goes beyond all these things. And then he is somebody who is in Gyana Vijnana Truptatma. Kutastha. Kutastha is somebody who is unshaken. The word Kuta means, for example, if you have seen a blacksmith has got a big anvil, a solid iron block which is called anvil. That solid iron block is called Kuta. Kutastha means a person who is like that solid iron block. Whatever happens, he is unmoved. Whatever happens, sukha, dukkha, mana, apamana, whatever happens, he is totally unmoved. So, such a person is established in yoga. So, these are the, this is what is the result of this yoga which attains some level of perfection. So, then in the next episode, we will see what Krishna is going to say about how exactly one has to do this yoga. We have only heard about the importance of yoga, the relevance of yoga, and then the what will be the achievement, what will you ultimately get if you practice yoga. But how exactly to do yoga, we will see in the next episode. Harihi Om Tat Sat.